Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. All across Scotland, people will be sleeping well in their beds tonight, safe in the knowledge that whiskey shall stay whiskey. There's been a decision made by the Labour government in Westminster which will cause many Scots great rejoicing. It will echo across the hills and glens, across the mountains and the lochs, and people will raise a wee dram and, swallow it with pleasure, because they've rejected a bid by, and I know, English whiskey makers. Should there be such a thing? Gosh, yeah, there are. But English whiskey makers want to change the legal definition of what makes a single malt whiskey. You see, they want to change it that you can make single malt whiskies by blending them. Now, it could be exactly the same whiskey, made the same way to the same recipe, but made in different distilleries and then put together and calling it a malt whiskey because everything is the same. But as anybody who knows whiskey knows, it's not always the same. There are things in every single distillery, the way it's stored, the way the barrels are. One barrel might be near a door that gets a little bit of a draft that might change the mix and so forth. Even within a single distillery, you can get different types of, or different flavours, different essences within the same whiskey. To make it by blending three from three different distilleries isn't a malt whiskey. It's a blended whiskey, no matter what you call it. Even if it's all made to exactly the same, recipe and put in the same oak casks, sherry or port, depending on what they are. Even if you're using the same water, they're all going to be different. And so they've rejected it and said, no, whiskey must only come from a single distillery, at least malt whiskey, single malt, must only come from a single distillery. They're not changing it. And the Scottish Whisky Association are going, because had they changed it, you just know that they would have been flooded with all this English whiskey. And it would have damaged sales. And it probably, I guarantee it wouldn't have been as good. It just wouldn't. And I'm sure there's very nice English whiskies. I'm sure. I've had a Welsh whiskey. I've had Japanese whiskies. I've had, unbelievably, at Christmas, I had a New Zealand single malt. Who knew such a thing existed? But all of them are whiskey with an E, which stands for eek. Because if it's got an E in it, it's not really a whiskey, with one exception. Bushmills. That's the only whiskey with an E that you can drink. Of course, it's the oldest distillery in the world. But it is a fine whiskey, a wee Bushmills. But all of the others with an E, they're just whiskey. Whiskey with no E, though, that's a different matter, isn't it? Highland Park, if anyone's asking. Thanks very much. Bye.